this crosses the line, I think. A lot of that airflow was more around the side pods. It will, of course, made a difference, but nowhere near as much of a difference as if it was like the 2021 regulations.
Max usually challenged the Ferraris at the front. Now he's barely managing to fight off Mick Schumacher.
I was very confused as to why the double stack didn't happen. You described basically what I was trying to say. They bottled it, basically.
Welcome to Stripping the Depping. You're joined by your usual co-host, AMG DENZ, aka Sim Racing Extraordinaire. And first of all, what can I say? We had quite an incredible Silverstone Grand Prix. And to unpack it all with us today, we have returning to the show a legend. You may know him as Engine Mode 11, but we have Dan. Dan, how's everything going? And what did you make of this epic race weekend we just had?
I'm still coming down from it, mate. To be honest, it was just those last few laps were just everything.
I agree completely. Just like when you think about Formula One and most people say, oh, this guy is turning like left or guy is going around in a circle. I think if you play that last 5 laps for anybody, they will fully understand just the buzz and just the vibe of it all, man, really, because just it was crazy. We had basically almost 5 cars essentially fighting each other. I think obviously Sainz got out in the end and managed to pull a gap in front of everybody. But again, even just to see just Leclerc trying to hold on, Lewis really pushing, Sergio pushing, even after basically his race being ruined from the restart. And even El Plan Fernando Alonso trying to get him in amongst the action too. It was crazy. And young Lando Norris somewhere in the mix there too, trying to again just uphold McLaren and do his bit as well. So incredible, just incredible stuff. But I think we'd be remiss as well, Dan, if we didn't start the episode just on that first lap incident. Just wow, just it's incredible. And I think we grill the FIA a lot for a lot of things that happened in the last 6 months. And by all means, I think also the marshals have such a huge part to play, considering that they're volunteering and a lot of them don't even get paid for their bravery and their sacrifices. That first lap instant with Zhou Guan Yu and obviously Albon as well. It's just crazy. And I just wanted to get your first response as well, Dan. What was your reaction, there just watching the race and just seeing that happen?
Yeah, it was, like you say, it was very scary. I did think we were going to have a serious injury, if not something worse. But yeah, it was just how he's got out of that car and then come back before the race has even finished and walking around the garages like nothing had happened. It's just incredible. Like even 10 years ago, I couldn't see that happening. But I have some concerns, maybe is the word to use, for the way the Alfa Romeo's crash structure, roll hoop, looked like it collapsed during the incident. But we'll have to wait and see for the FIA's report on that. But yeah, no, luckily he was relatively fine, and Albon's been cleared as well.
Exactly, and you hit a nail on the head there as well, Dan. Just like over the years, like we've seen a lot of incidents, not just in Formula One, but across the pond as well, in IndyCar and other motorsport disciplines, claim the lives of many people. And just for that velocity of crash, to result in the driver being able to like walk away, like you mentioned, I think he was literally there with Stefano Domenicali, just basically doing thumbs up to the cameras and a lot of PR. And again, I say a lot of PR, but many years ago he wouldn't have even been in that position. So I think, like you mentioned, we have to be really like grateful, and it's testament to all the engineers and all the people that look on the safety side of the sport as well, to try and make sure that these drivers, they have a long career, they're able to kind of do the sport for many years without having to kind of like suffer at the fatal expenses of some of the things we had earlier on in the like the life and infancy of the sport. And also, just like you mentioned too, Albon as well was one to get very unlucky with just try and avoid the accident. And then
Yep.
ironically, Seb Vettel, was probably unsighted and caught the back of him too, which sent him flying into a wall, which I imagine probably triggered the G meter sensor on the front of the car. There's like a red flashing light, I think, that's on top of the nose structure, which will tell the medical delegates if like the driver needs to be double checked. And we've seen that
Yeah.
thing recently over the years, being taken quite seriously. So again, it's really good that that aspect of it got dealt with. But it's like you can almost read my notes as well, man, because I had just as a caveat there as well that the way that the roll hoop came off on Zhou Guanyu's car as well, it literally just the yellow. I mean, Valtteri has like a black roll hoop, and then Zhou has like a fluorescent day glow green one because he's the rookie driver in the team. But just the way that that just broke off, I guess, with the energy of the crash and how long the car was skidding upside down for as it digged into the gravel as well, is definitely something I agree with you, where the FI will want to probably run more, like, I wouldn't say experiments, but at least do some more research on it. And we've even seen, like, after post, like, Roman Grosjean and his accident, the FIA was still taking a key interest and looking at things they could do differently. I mean, probably not to everyone's taste. They did come with the pants and jewelry kind of epidemic, which wiped the paddock for quite a while. But I think people have been able to get on board with at least the more sensible elements and more kind of reasonable aspects of their findings and implementation, safety implementations further to that. But yeah, like I agree with you. It's so good to see, Joe and Album get away unscathed. And what's ironic as well, I mean, we'll do it in a very interesting order, but would you also make of the red flag also being waved because of some protesters that managed to get onto the circuit? Did you know much about this at all?
Yes. Now I didn't. It, it was going to be red flagged anyway, obviously because of the incident,
Mm.
and then these protesters for some anti-oil um, representatives jumped the fence, as far as I know, and I think it was the Hanger. Was it Hanger Straight? I think they sort of just sat on the middle of the circuit. Um, I mean, I'm all for protesting.
Mm.
Disruptive protesting has achieved a lot in the past, but this crosses the line. I think in they're not only putting themselves at danger, they could have, if the race wasn't red flagged and at full speed, we could have had a serious driver injury or a marshal being injured, as well as themselves. So there's better ways of doing it. And as well, I'm not really sure if F1 is really what they want to be protesting, considering the leaps and bounds that they've made in hybrid technology and carbon neutral fuels and things like that. If anything, F1's probably actually leading the field in that sort of technology. But yeah, better ways of doing it. If they wanted to cause proper disruption, all they had to do was probably just glue themselves to the floor outside the track.
Yeah,
They
but
wouldn't have been very popular with people, but it would have been a lot safer.
absolutely. And we've seen that sort of thing with like the Insulate Britain movement over here as well in the UK, and probably for our international listeners as well. Like, there's a huge shift, I guess, in this country as well for, more sustainable fuels and as well as that, this energy not being wasted, because at least in the Insulate Britain case, they were talking about basically houses and lofts not being insulated. So with the cost of like heating and gas and electricity going up, you pay for all of this stuff and then it's all lost because the houses don't insulate the heat as well, so it's just lost energy. And it doesn't really help the environment. A, it's not really great for the consumer because they're paying more for it. B, and then C, when you try and, I guess, do this in a more like reasonable manner, it just doesn't get picked up upon like, by the
Yeah,
politicians and stuff. So like you mentioned, there is a way and a certain distance you do get with like the more kind of forceful, more kind of like vigilant protesting. But I think you're spot on the money as well when you said that it shouldn't be at the expense of other people's like livelihoods. Bear in mind, the marshals don't even get paid, a lot of them, just for the volunteering work that they do. So to put them in that situation where they might have to remove you off the circuit, and on top of that, they could potentially get plowed by a Formula One car at 180 miles an hour, I don't think is fair. and like you mentioned, it won't be popular amongst a lot of people because whilst people get the message, it's the articulation, the way they're doing it, which I guess is unfavorable. And another really great caveat I wanted to get your take on as well, on the topic of this as well, Dan, is just Uncle Seb Vettel was basically he opened up the Silverstone show on the Sunday by driving what is basically one of Nigel Mansell's Williams car, the FW14B, which I think he had basically rebuilt. It took him quite a couple of months, if not years, to kind of rebuild that car back to like a position or a kind of like state where it could be driven around the circuit like the way he did. But the nuance kind of point of it is Vettel had this race with no trace message, which is a campaign he essentially wanted to demonstrate by running that car, which I think has a V10 Renault engine. Shout out V10 engines, amazing stuff, stuff there. But just to run a car, even I guess by that like age, a quite antiquated car from the 90s on carbon neutral fuels, it's quite awesome. And the question I wanted to ask you, like Dan, is like, with the improvement in engineering and like fluid engineering and dynamics and stuff like this as well, could we see like maybe the combustion engine stay in motorsport racing, even despite the social pressures that you have from the EU and other world leaders?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the replays of Seb doing that lap, if you didn't know it was carbon neutral fuel, you would never have known because it sounds exactly the same. It goes, exactly the same. And as far as I know, I might have to fact check me on this one, but they didn't actually have to do any major changes to the engine to make it run this carbon neutral fuel. So, if we can continue with the engines that, all right, maybe not the V6s, they're not the best for noise, but keeping an internal combustion to give the noise, because that's part of the huge appeal of F1 as well. I've watched Formula E, and although the racing's good, it's missing that something which I think you can only get from like a V10. So yeah, absolutely, I'm all for it, and bring it on.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. And it's just such an amazing achievement for them as well that they've, like you rightfully mentioned too, like they've managed to essentially make it more clean, make it more sustainable without the expense of either the sound or the wow factor of these cars. Because people underestimate that at the end of the day, they're prototypes. They like a lot of the technology in them to this day is still kind of class leading. And with that car in particular, I think it would have probably been one of the first, if not the roundabout correct time period era where we had the active suspension and these other like marvelous kind of inventions come along that Adrian Newey was trying to pioneer and bring to the cars as well. So I love it, and we also have like a thing in the UK as well, which is the Goodwood Festival. And when you see all these cars going up the hill and doing the hill climb or just doing the demonstration runs, I guess for all of us, we can appreciate just how much engineering and how much like just how far technologies has come along. And even then, if you look at stuff like 20 years ago, it's still kind of relevant or applicable today.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned Goodwood as well. I'm watching the that fan car, I can't remember the make of it now, but seeing that take the top honours of the fastest hill climb, and yeah, that was insane.
It really was. It was ridiculous. It's crazy. And
Yeah.
although to a lot of people, like a fan-powered car might seem like a new evolution, like it's something that had been tried in Formula One before. I think was it Tyrrell that tried it. I think it was Ken Tyrrell that either had like the wind-powered car or like maybe the six-wheeler
Yeah,
car.
they had the Tyrrell was the six-wheeler,
Mhm.
and then as you can probably hear from me furiously typing on my keyboard,
Same here.
don't worry, we'll edit it. Oh, it's the Brabham BT46 DENZ. I knew that off the
There
top of
we
my head.
go.
But yeah, that used a fan basically on the rear of the car where the diffuser is to basically get more air through the floor and give it more downforce. And I think I didn't Google this bit. This bit I do know. I think it only raced one race before it was deemed illegal. But yeah, and that was, what was that? Here we go, 1978. There you go.
Wow.
So quite a while ago.
Exactly. But even then, just to see something similar like that come back into like an environment today, it's amazing. And this is what engineers do as well. Sometimes for the future, they'll look back to the past, and a lot of people will give Adrian Newey, I guess, a lot of credit this year for Red Bull's success so far, just because although ground effects for a lot of the teams, a lot of the teams are on the grid now weren't even teams when ground effects was a thing. But for Adrian Newey, he lived during a time, and he was engineering during a time where they had it back in the day. So yeah, it's just crazy to see this, even from the technical point of view, just how far things have come across. And sometimes you see kind of ideas that are almost like a nod or a throwback to something that was around nearly 30 or 40 years ago. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. But on to the next question there, Dan. Like also leading into this Grand Prix from a sporting point of view, Max arrived, of course, and yeah, due to a couple of things which we'll address maybe later in the podcast, he was getting booed. And I found it fascinating just to see kind of what responses there were, because there's some people saying, come on, like they shouldn't boo Max because of like essentially what happened, and it wasn't necessarily him that did what annoyed people. It was ironically his father-in-law that had did something that triggered people. Whereas the other people that said, well, Lewis was getting booed, Lewis has been booed, like, if he's got booed, why shouldn't Max get booed? Where do you stand just like on booing generally? Because my kind of 10 pence on it is that like fans should be able to boo anybody. I don't really care who it is. Like you're always going to get somebody that gets booed. And if it's Max in Silverstone or if it's Lewis in, let's say, Zandvoort, that's just part and part of the game. And both of us being from England as well, we see it week in, week out with football, and how the fans would cheer, certain teams or certain players if they do something which is not favorable, or just to get into the mental mind, or just to throw that player or that person off board. But I guess for me, where there is a line, or where maybe things get too far, is like when the booing becomes like a vehicle for discrimination, and where people then use it as a thing to
Yeah.
go overboard. But what's your take on it?
Yeah, so booing isn't new to the sport. Like I remember Vettel getting booed everywhere he went, and there was drivers before that got booed. If people are out there paying £300 to go to Silverstone, then they've got every right to boo, as far as I'm concerned. Um, like booing's booing. Is it really that bad? Who cares? Let's be honest. It doesn't bother me. Even if I was standing on the grid and I heard it, it wouldn't really bother me. It's like you say, it's part of the pantomime. But the real problems are, like you say, when it gets used as that sort of form of discrimination. And the first thing that sticks out in my mind when we talk about that is Spain 2008 with the infamous blackface and the Hamilton family in the crowd. If you remember, I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
like that's the real issue, not the booing.
Yeah,
So,
and to add to that point as well, Dan, like yeah, like I agree with you 110%. And if it's sad that it will just be a minority of people that will do stuff like that, but at the same time, I guess we can't. When I say a minority, I don't want people listening to this think, "Oh, he's just trying to dust it underneath the carpet." Those people should, take the relevant action against them that is required. And yeah, it's not acceptable and shouldn't be condoned. And we'll return back to this point later, because I can't not ask you a question.
no, yeah, I know,
but
I know.
but yeah, getting back to the kind of sporting parts of the racing, of course, and of the podcast. Okay, so we had the accident with Zhou Guan Yu and obviously Albon, and quite a few people were like taken out of that race from that instant. Even Russell, kind of, and I was a bit skeptical when Russell said, like I got out of the car just to make sure that Zhou was okay, because did you really? But then honestly, like looking at the footage and seeing him on top of the tire barrier and like waving at the marshal to come quickly, then I was like, okay, cool. So he genuinely did want to check on the fellow well-being of another driver, which we can't knock. I think it's good that even in sports, even at this competitive level, there's like a level of humanity that all the drivers, in most cases, will show each other. So can't knock him for that. But getting to the kind of restart on this one, Dan, like there was a bit of a storm on the internet, because essentially Max had a marvelous start and managed to pip Leclerc to it, and obviously Sainz as well, which started on pole. And Lewis too. Lewis as well just managed to basically wiggle his way through. I believe it would have probably been Leclerc, and on top of that as well, Perez too, to get third place. And then when the race was red flagged off, the stewards basically came to a decision that because they hadn't crossed the safety car line, because the race basically got red flagged without an actual racing lap being completed, they were going to restart the race essentially from the qualifying order. And I can't
Yeah.
lie, it did rattle quite a few cages and people out there. Like, what's your take on that? Do you think that that's fair? Is it something that the FIA probably should look at too in future, or for what race we got in the end, does it not really matter?
So I think they didn't really have a huge amount of choice because not all cars passed the SC2 line, safety car 2 line, before the red flag was thrown. And I believe when they do the restart order, they do it from let's like the sector 1 timing loop. But if not everyone's gone through it, it's difficult to then turn around and say, oh, we'll use half of these timings from sector 1 to set the grid, and then the last 6 cars, good luck, sort of thing. So I think they had no choice but to sort of revert to a known configuration, which would have been the starting grid and qualifying order.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So yeah, I just don't think they had a choice really. Yeah, I understand people sort of get upset and emotional about it, but F1's not perfect, and sometimes you do have these little oddities that pop up.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think as well, just in terms of the outcome, I don't really think it drastically changed the race all that much anyways. And actually, it was kind of, I guess, more of a challenge for the likes of Lewis, the likes of even Max, to see if they can replicate the great starts that they got the first time, and then vice versa. Science would have been kicking himself knowing he had such a really poor start to begin with, and ultimately this was his time to shine. And there'd been in like an increasing pressure, which we'll get on a bit later too. So getting into the race then, so we have the safety, well, we have the red flag restart. It is a very kind of topsy-turvy first couple of corners. Sergio Perez basically gets collected by Charles Leclerc going for a really audacious move into the third
Yeah.
corner down the inside, and actually takes a bit of front wing damage, which I can't lie, I was pretty surprised that the FIA didn't intervene even there and give a penalty, considering the damage that Perez did get. And then further down the line as well, just as we were about to get to the first stint and the first round of pit stops, Max gets that overtake done on Sainz, which again is just, I think, a testament to this year's Red Bull car. The RB18 is just a monster in the straights. There's this
Yeah.
every generic characteristic we've said about a Red Bull car in terms of, oh, they're beautiful in the corners and they've got so much traction and the car pivots on a sixpence. But then in terms of the straight line speed, you almost feel like Fernando Alonso Q 2016, no power, no power, GP2 engines. But they really have turned it around, and it's not only just Red Bull, but Honda as well, I think, deserve the praise for that also. But then, just as you think things were getting spicy, you have Harriet Ainsley with just some more spice, just some more flavors in there, because of course, Max basically reports that there was some issue with the car. I think initially, just as viewers, we were suspecting it could be some sort of puncture, because we know Silverstone's a very high speed circuit. It's not necessarily the nicest track to the Pirelli tires in past lives. So he came in, and then even after the pit stop, he basically said that there'd been no change. To which his engineer comes on the radio and says, "Mate, basically there's something wrong with the floor." At that stage, they don't give too much information, but just the language alone was just like, "Mate, deal with it," because we're basically
Yeah.
stuck with it. And the kind of question I wanted to lead with you on this one, Dan, was just how critical is damage basically to the floor area of the cars this year? Because I know the answer to that is going to be, well, quite obviously quite big, but like the comparison I was going to make is that Leclerc actually damaged part of his front wing end plate too by that like really brave move. He stuck on Perez and basically ran the entire Grand Prix with half a front wing, at
Yeah.
least half of that. And they mentioned is 5 points of downforce. But then for Max, basically, we're suffering from something we, to the naked eye, couldn't see because, it was basically underneath the floor and around the Venturi kind of tunnels around the ground effect part of the car too. So how important is that, for the listeners listening in?
Yeah, so with these new 2022 cars, there's a huge emphasis on the underbody floor and diffuser compared to the previous generation, where a lot of that airflow was more around the side pods and across the rear of the car. And apparently in Max's case, from what I've read, is that a piece of one of the Alpha Tauris managed to lodge itself in the floor underneath the car, which, it is a very important part of the car for this year. So it definitely would, well, we saw it looked like the car was broken, how much time he was losing. So yeah, and in terms of Charles losing that part of his end plate off his front wing, it will of course made a difference, but nowhere near as much of a difference as if it was like the 2021 regulations. So yeah, basically everyone just turned into bumper cars really at the start, didn't they?
Turned into a stock car race.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like you said as well, it's so interesting finally for us to kind of see in a racing context as well, is how much emphasis there is and a shift towards ground effects as well with this year's car, and obviously the floor too, because yeah, like we mentioned earlier, it's not something we could really see. I guess it's mainly the Red Bull guys that will know because they have the telemetry, the data, the airflow sensors and stuff like that as well to pick something like that up. But yeah, like you mentioned, the car just seemed totally just a completely different car almost. And it's like, wow, like it's nuts. Like I'm used to seeing Max usually challenge the Ferraris at the front. Now he's barely managing to fight off Mick Schumacher, which again is another honorable shout out we'll return to later on in the podcast. But yeah, so moving from that kind of point, then like Max being out the race really threw this race into another spiral, because then if Ferrari thought they were going to have an easy day off because Max wasn't there, and obviously Perez as well had been basically effectively taken out at that earlier phase too, if they thought it was just going to be an easy Ferrari 1-2, then they were damn wrong, because Sir Lewis Hamilton, just with this W13, was like, nope, I want to make sure Dan shaves his head today. I'm going to see if I can secure this W and make sure Dan loses his bet. So, Ferrari had more food for thought there, as Lewis was basically matching them in terms of pace. And for Leclerc, you could argue it was the front wing damage, but for Sainz, there was no excuse. It's just one of those ones where like he was digging deep and trying his best, but I just think he hasn't really adapted to this year's car as quickly as Charles has, and you can definitely see that even in context that we saw yesterday, with Leclerc still being able to match him and follow him, even with a car that had substantial wing damage. So that was interesting. And this question I wanted to throw to you on that one, Dan, was, yeah, just like, there's been a bigger kind of emphasis on the inter-team battles this year. We've seen Perez kind of like getting onto Red Bull in relation to Max, and now we're seeing it as well with Ferrari, with obviously Charles and Sainz too. But do you think that Ferrari missed the trick by not capitalizing on Red Bull's misfortune this weekend, and basically them inverting the positions, but maybe when it's a bit too late before the first round of pit stops? And I think also, as we saw from some pictures afterwards, it looked like Charles is a bit hard done by. He felt hard done by the team in a sense, when Ocon safety car basically came out and then the box Sainz, but not him, which, maybe they could have done, although it would have been a double stack too. Do you think they missed the trick at all, or it is just how it played out?
Definitely. I was very confused as to why the double stack didn't happen. I'd have to go back and look, but it almost makes me think that Carlos made the call to come in and sort of caught them off guard a little bit. But I've said pretty early on in the season that the only people that are going to lose Charles this championship are Ferrari. And yesterday was, I think, a prime example of that, where they're just overcomplicating everything. I mean, even Carlos coming over the radio telling them to stop inventing, which was quite amusing, I thought. So there's certainly rust on the Ferrari blade, where they've not really had to fight for a championship. for a while, whereas Red Bull, of course, have refined that over the last year. So they are able to make those split-second decisions, whereas I think Ferrari need to sort of get back into that mindset.
Definitely. I think it's something which it's eluded them for a really long time. Like, sorry, like it's just the typical Ferrari thing to do, this to bottle something, or it's so inconceivable sometimes how they could let something so simple become so complicated when it's really not that complicated. I'm speaking to you, and my hands are just up in the air like an Italian too, just like what are they doing? But
Yeah. Well, you
yeah.
described basically what I was trying to say. They bottled it, basically.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, and like sometimes if I actually like think with a Ferrari cap on, I get this like how they get caught up in their own drama, because what I saw yesterday was them on one hand not wanting to cost Charles in the championship because they've already lost out on vital points and you need Charles to basically capitalize, especially on days where Max isn't at the top. But on the flip side, Science as well, that it's almost like they're trying to keep him happy. And for now, even though to me it's very abundantly clear who the number one and number two driver is in the team, they don't overtly want to have that dynamic in the team just yet. And maybe like Mercedes, they're trying to give Science as much rope as they can. They really wanted Science to try and win that race. And like I was gonna save this for the next kind of question or like line of questioning, but essentially Science is no longer a TSV. For those asking what TSV is, a top step virgin. He's finally left the top step virgin gang. Like it's only really Russell and Lando Norris, which you have to look at them and say, well, when is that day gonna come? But for at least Science, he finally made the grades. And I think if I was gonna if I was gonna go with the more like smiley, happy go lucky kind of like take on it, I think it was a good win for the team that Science managed to get that result. And I'm really hoping it's gonna like rejuvenate him to push harder, to continue to go for it. Because I think in terms of his brain and this is capacity behind the wheel, he's got it, because we even saw in Monaco just like the capacity when they were telling him to come in and box, and he said, "No, I'm not boxing. Like, if Red Bull want to box, and if you've already boxed Leclerc, I'm gonna stay out because ultimately I can stay out on these wet tires until the cows come home, until the track gets dry, and I can save myself a cheap stop." Whereas they've already committed themselves, so not only have they boxed for Inters, they're gonna have to box again for dry tires. So the mental capacity of Carlos Sainz, I think, is something which is very unspoken about. But where I think he gets undone is, to me, he's not the out and out racer like a Michael, like a Charles Leclerc, like even like I was speaking to another Ferrari fan, like David James Noble, shout out to him as well, where even like Jules Villeneuve, they wouldn't melt butter. Like there's nothing you can do or take away from them. They're just out and out racers. And I see it with Max too. It's like cold and calculated. Just if I need to get the job done, I don't care who's us on the line. Like I need this because ultimately I don't want to be in a position where I'm having to fight for a championship on the last Grand Prix of a season when I could have wrapped it up 6 races ago. So yeah, Ferrari, whilst I think it's good for for Sainz's morale, and I think he needed that because up until this point, the season hadn't really kicked. Everybody was in 2022 and he was still in 2021. People were still telling me about like how good he was in 2021. I was like, yeah, that's 2021. Now we're in 2022. So finally, he got that kind of roll of momentum. But in terms of the championship, yeah, Ferrari, like it's not good. They clearly had the opportunity to have both cars, 1 and 2, yesterday, for the race win and for maximum points on a day where Red Bull really had to come from behind to make anything good of that weekend, like salvageable. And yet they still somehow managed to get one car, yes, with the race win, but the other down in P4. And I think if there was an extra lap, I think El Plan Alonso, or usually as we call him on this podcast, Alonso, might have upped his pace and got him too. So, yeah, very, very intriguing. And it's a strange one because even at Red Bull, you've seen this kind of power dynamic with Perez putting himself in positions where it's almost hard for the strategy team to deny him of a good strategy or making good calls with him. At least with Red Bull, it's just okay. This is what we're doing, and we're going to commit to it, and that's it. But Ferrari, just it always happens, and there's always just
Yeah,
one or two things. But I think we do have to give them credit, at least, or science credit, should I say, for sticking to his own guns and just like not allowing, the team's intervention to stop him from achieving what he did yesterday. And kind of on that
yeah,
note as well, Dan, I wanted to ask you, like, in terms of this being like a first race win for Sainz, where do you rank it for him? Because for me, I look at it in terms of he finally did it, and it was good that he did it. Was it the most spectacular race win he could have got? Not really. Was it one where he absolutely dominated his teammate and he did it on merit? Mm, yes and no. Or did he get really fortunate, with the safety car? Well, not safety car, the red flag restart, and then basically him getting a second chance, basically to perfect his start. Perhaps there have been other kind of maiden wins or just wins in general. Where you're like, wow, that was really emphatic, and it either was a dominant performance or it was like a strategic masterclass. I don't really know where that performance yesterday falls in. Like, what
yeah.
do you think?
It was more, again, not downplaying what Carlos achieved, but it
Mhm.
was kind of gifted to him when they decided to just leave Leclerc out hang to dry. And then while he was busy fighting for his life, holding up Perez and his little train, it just allowed Carlos to zoom off into the distance. So I think maybe if Perez cleared Charles a lot sooner, then maybe Checo could have stolen a win. I'm not really sure, but you got to look back at, like you say, some other drivers' first wins, like Ocon's in Hungary last year. That was just bananas, really. You know, but hey, a win's a win, and he got it.
Exactly, and that's the thing. Like, regardless of what we say, just like he'll go down in history as a Silverstone winner. And it's if you're gonna win any race, I think in terms of the heritage of Formula One, man, the trophies are so nice as well. I'll never forget one year. I think as some part of like a sponsorship deal, like there was a Santander gig where like they tried to give Lewis this like fake kind of like stylophone trophy. It's like, man, don't give me this. I want the gold like trophy. And they're like, okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay, giving you the gold trophy. But yeah, like, and I think yeah, regardless of the circumstances, I think because he's a nice enough guy and you could see like how mentally it had been playing on him for quite some time. I'm not this happy or not like dissatisfied that he got it in the end, and I think if
yeah,
any of the top three, top five drivers had got that race win, I think at one point or another, all of them would have been deserving for it. So yeah, I think that there's a fair shout for all of them. And then on the shout of like podium finishes as well, we had Sir Lewis Hamilton with a strong
yeah,
performance. He's tried to get and improve upon the results with a further modified W13. I think for myself, being in that Mercedes camp, I was cautious about these upgrades, and I was cautious about Silverstone because essentially they resurfaced the entire circuit to make it a bit more smooth. And we know that Silverstone is like a purpose-built race circuit, so it's not. When I say conventional, although it is a conventional race circuit, by Formula One standards, I think Silverstone is the last of a dying breed of probably
oh
that
yeah,
Spa and Suzuka. I think the rest of circuits are just very modern, or they just have possess their own kind of like feng shui in a way in terms of being
yeah.
street
All designed
circuits.
on a computer.
Oh yeah, like computer aided as well in terms of the design. And Herman Tilke and his son is thinking, ooh, that's a nice 90 degrees angle. Let's put that there, followed by like, 2 miles straight. Seems to be the formula for many modern day street circuits and Formula One circuits. But going back to W13 then, like, what did you make of Mercedes' step with these upgrades? And what's your honest assessment? Is it smoke and mirrors? Do you think that just that car, it was always going to be a bit more drivable around the circuit like Silverstone, which is similar in certain aspects in terms of the track surface to like Spain? Or do you think we should probably give Mercedes some credit, for not backing down and can trying to bring some form of upgrade that's going to push the car closer to the championship fight, even if they're not really in it at this stage?
Yeah, so I think Silverstone definitely favours that car compared to, let's say, Spain. Because believe it or not, when I actually did used to run, I've run around the Barcelona circuit, and the track surface is well, it's not very flat. Let's put it that way. It's got quite a few bumps, whereas Silverstone is a bit more flat. And the upgrade that they bought was quite significant in terms of like the floor changes. And they seem to have worked. And there was a really good overhead shot during the race. And I can't remember which lap it was now, but it was more towards the end of the race. And I think it was Lewis behind. And then I think it was probably Charles and Perez fighting. And then as they go round through the old international straights around there, you can just see Lewis just absolutely fly up like the back of both of them, where the W13 just looked like it had so much more grip and control through that corner than the two cars in front of him. And watching that footage back will probably alert a lot of other teams that they have genuinely moved a step forward. So maybe they'll... I don't know. I'm not convinced that they'll win a race this year. Sorry, Mercedes fans. But there's definitely improved.
And that's what I was gonna say as well, Dan. Like, I mean, I'm hoping that they're gonna at least win one race. If it's by, you know, a Ferrari explosion of team orders, when when it is, sometimes I feel so sorry for Max engineers sometimes, because it's just one minor thing. What did I tell you? Why am I warming up the tires for extra laps? How did you put me in this position? It's like everything, and I respect it too, because it's like he wants no incompetence. He needs everything on the money, and you know, to win championships and to win them in panache and style. That's how you need to go and treat every single weekend as well. So I quite admire it, to be honest. But yeah, just like, unless those two things happen, I think it will be tricky. But just to know that race pace wise, like, Lewis at least wasn't too far, and it would have been nice as well to see how George would have fared if he was in the race as well. But then
Yeah.
we have a look at some of the upcoming tracks too. We've got Austria, which we'll save a bit later because I want to like have a separate segment with that on you as well, just in relation to our expectations for that. But again, Paul Ricard, really interesting circuit, and again, kind of unconventional because it's a track in the middle of nowhere that has like 1,000 different configurations, and for the most part is known as like a GT3 and like tire testing circuit. So not really conventional. Then we have Hungary, which I actually think it's half and half for Mercedes, because Hungary doesn't necessarily have the smoothest track surface either. And I think in 1 year, like a drain storm or like a drain cover, I think basically got like completely taken out by one of the Force Indias that year too. But again, it's a circuit with a lot of low speed corners, which I think Norris pointed out is one of the W13 strengths as well. Then also we have Spa, which we know has had a lot of modifications to it since the last time we went there. And of course, with European weather, there's no shortage of what could happen at
Who
you know, the
knows?
Belgian Grand Prix as well, you know. And then you've got the Zandvoort Grand Prix and then the Monza Grand Prix. So there's a real mix of so many different circuits that possess different traits. And as much as I'd love to call Silverstone a conventional circuit, it's not really a conventional circuit when you look at the other street circuits, and there are more of them than there are of Silverstone or of a Suzuka or of like, you know, of a Spa too. So it'd just be crazy to see. But yeah, I think you're correct in your assessment of it as well, Dan. That I think they have taken a step forward. But even for me, just I'm not gonna put my chips in just yet, man. Because I did it when it came to Spain. I was like, yes, they did that test day at Spain. They understand the porpoising. Then, you know, Lewis had that unfortunate issue with Magnussen, but again, his race pace was immaculate. And then a week later at Monaco, bam, just they're really struggling to be even in the top 10, and it was just a masterclass drive from both George and Lewis just to kind of get that car where it kind of should be. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And also just with the cost cap this year as well, like how much leverage do they have to continue bringing new parts to this car, A, and then B as well, just like lots of people saying, well, Mercedes don't get right with this basically radical side pod car. They should just, completely just ditch that and go for a B-spec car. But we've seen at the moment too, and probably be interesting to get your thoughts on this as well, Dan. Like Aston have tried the kind of B-spec car with the kind of more conventional side pods. I can't really say it's done much better for them, although I think Seb's definitely settled in a lot more. And then even at the weekend, and you know what? Actually, as much as Latifi's caused me a lot of pain in the last 7 months with what happened in the dying embers of 2021, just in terms of like, oh well, they're gonna give Albon the new package and give Latifi the old package. And Latifi managed to basically out-qualify Albon with the old package. I guess, it's rainy qualifying, so it wouldn't give them all the kind of data they're looking for. But nonetheless, Latifi out-qualified Albon and got into Q3 as well. Like, yeah, like, what's your take on just like teams kind of changing? And is it just a case, like, I know kind of what your answer is going to be, but like, is it as easy as saying, you know what, sod the side pods in and put them in next week? Can you fundamentally do that with a car if it doesn't suit your design language or aero philosophy?
So in the Mercedes case, in a, it had to be really extreme, but there's nothing to say they can't turn back to the Barcelona spec, because at the first test they turned up with a more conventional looking side pod.
Mm-hmm.
So there is the possibility to revert to that, but I personally wouldn't bother. They've made their bed. If they were going to swap back, they would have done it in the first couple of races.
Sure.
They've made their bed. Now they're going to sleep in it. I don't think the side pods is the cause of their issues. I think it's more to do with the underfloor.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just in regards to the Tiffy, I honestly don't think I could have laughed any harder when I saw his P10. Because I didn't watch qualifying live. I just looked on the results and checked, and I was just like, something major must have happened in this qualifying for him to be in P10, with poor old Alex in P16 with the new parts. And then unfortunately as well, during the race, he didn't even make it off the start finish line.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And then with I mean, it looked like it was just more the front nose that had taken the majority of the brunt, but you could imagine maybe that there might have been some damage or to the side pods or structural part of the chassis in that crash too, because he got whacked from Sebastian and collected the wall, and then I think got collected by somebody else that was trying to avoid him as well. So yeah, whilst I don't think it's completely Albon's fault, like you mentioned too, I just find it really ironic and kind of funny that in inverted commas, Goat Tiffy managed to actually do something constructive for a change, and it was with the car that didn't actually get the love or the boost of the new kind of design language of the more conventional sideboard. So yeah, just it's interesting, and like you mentioned there too, like it maybe could be done, but as to whether you'd want to do that depends probably in the situation you're in, like you rightfully mentioned as well. And yeah, for Mercedes, I think why it's one thing just changing it for the sake of changing it too, but I would like to think that maybe they're of that mind of they're very, 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 very determined to understand this car. And obviously, until they fully understand it, it's always going to be one of those ones where it's like, it could have been the one that we got onto the back of, or we were one or two upgrades away from, or the rule changes perhaps would have favored this particular configuration we had. And then, that's the thing. It's like, I guess they want to make sure that no stone is left unturned, in relation to this, the kind of concept they've gone for this year.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to see where they are in France when these new regulations come in regards to the bendy floors, because I think perhaps maybe Mercedes have missed a trick, whereas Ferrari and Red Bull haven't. And I did put up a thread on my Twitter where I sort of looked at the underfloor of the RB18, and I'll go for it now. So basically, you're in the regulations, you're allowed a certain amount of surface area for the titanium skid block, and we all know, that's what produces the sparks we see on TV. And in every case, it's always been put on the front of the plank underneath the car. to protect it. Whereas in Red Bull's case, it looks like they've actually split that allocation between some of the various mounting points on the plank as well as the front, which coincidentally is the points where the FIA do their tests, their flexibility tests, which you're only allowed 2 mil of deflection, but apparently and supposedly the Red Bull and Ferrari floors are deflecting as much to 6 millimeters, they think, which is possibly the reason why those have got the jump on Mercedes in terms of pace. But in France, they're bringing in some stricter tests, so I would be very interested to see what happens in France.
Well, yeah, I mean, and thank you for explaining that as well, Dan, because I did see a lot of like bendy floor shenanigans on the internet as well. And when I saw it, I was like, not going completely off topic, I was like, man, again. So last year it was Christian Horner and Wings and Tings, and there was a segment of just like, basically this wings too flexible and this wings too bendy, and was Red Bull's rear wing, and then it was Mercedes front wing, and then I was like, oh gosh, the politics begin. And then yeah, like you mentioned as well, now it's the floors. We've got bendy floors. So I was like, Jesus, what's next? Bendy drivers like Latifi, like, it's crazy. But yeah, like you mentioned there too. Perhaps like you've mentioned, like Ferrari and Red Bull have like been very clever and found a kind of way to, I wouldn't say cheat, but almost interpret the rules in a way where the FIA couldn't really do anything. And if it's a thing where the FIA are going to more rigidly police it, or they're going to bring in these technical directives for Paul Ricard, where they're not going to be allowed to do that, then yeah, where does that stack them against like, the more conventional teams like Mercedes, A? And B, you maybe then could also put more pressure on Mercedes, because if it's a thing where we go to France and then we see that Red Bull still are like 8 tenths or 5 tenths quicker than Merc, and likewise Ferrari too, then I think, like you said as well, like maybe it's Mercedes that haven't really got that yet, or they haven't understood the assignment, and now it's going to be a game of catch up for them to essentially get that part. And obviously by the time they do that, Red Bull and Ferrari would have already had something else which they've engineered, or like obviously pioneered to a sense, to give them another upper hand.
Yeah, and like anything that bends, as long as it passes a static FIA test, it's deemed legal. So if it's deflecting 6 mil on a straight, it's not doing what it should be doing, but it passed an FIA test, so it's legal.
Exactly. And again, that's like, this goes to show just the genius behind like F1 engineering too, because it's about, that's the thing, it's about kind of being a bit sneaky, and like it's not illegal for those reasons you just mentioned. It would pass a FIA test, but in terms of like the actual like sporting element of it, obviously Mercedes are not going to be smiling, or they're not going to be too happy.
No.
They didn't do it, and it would be the same if you were to reverse it. I'm sure Red Bull probably weren't too happy when Mercedes had the dual access like DAS system, which again was really, I feel pushing kind of what you could do. But then Mercedes will argue, well, they co-designed it with the blessing of the FIA at each and every single part of the build phase of it, and the development and the construction phase of it. So yeah, you're always gonna have, I guess, teams trying to protest each other. And even recently, just like with the whole green bull thing at Aston Martin, people were very skeptical as to how they got that design in a time and space where we know a lot of like ex Red Bull mechanics and engineers, and like team senior people had left and then gone to Aston Martin, and how quickly would have been able to actually replicate that, with the advancement of 3D printing and a lot of these things too. So yeah, I think that's a very interesting point, and thank you as well, Dan, for explaining that, because even for me, I was reading it and I was like, what's going on now with these? Every week there's just something, man. So yeah, and then to get into the next one as well there, Dan, like so obviously we had a really spectacular race in the end. No one was seriously harmed. We had a very spectacular race, especially in the last 5 laps as well. But who for you was the driver of the day? Because there was quite a couple of shouts there. I think, who was it that got it yesterday? Was it Sainz that got it in the end? I think no, it was Perez.
Perez. Yeah, I think Perez got it. And I'd be hard to pick someone else other than Perez. I think Sainz, maybe. I think any of them on the podium could have, could be a worthy contender. But yeah, no,
Yeah,
Checo did well to recover the way he did.
yeah, I definitely think so too. Because especially when if you get front wing damage, like, and you get in the middle of a race near your pit stop and stuff like that, you can kind of accept that. But when it's on the first lap of the race and it basically puts you an entire pit stop down, it must be just one of the worst feelings. And then even when I think people need to appreciate as well as even if you do get a front wing change, it still doesn't completely restore the car to 100%, because as much as the wings are probably engineered and manufactured down to the same tolerances, same standards, like, I always feel that when you start changing parts, even if they're like for like, they're never exactly the same in the way they feel and maybe the feedback the driver would get from it as well, right?
Yeah, and a lot of that it would be psychological to a
Mm.
degree. But sometimes, they can't put a like for like. They have to put an older spec wing on it, and then they spend most of the race complaining that the balance isn't right. Well, yes, it's because it wasn't designed for this chassis. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's one of those things. But he kept his head down. He kept his cool, and he took the podium for his trouble.
Yeah,
He
and
did basically exactly what he was supposed to do, and that's score as many points as possible when Max drops the ball. Not, floor damage wasn't necessarily Max's fault, but that's what you need from your number two is to basically be at the top when your number one's down below.
exactly that. And what I'll also say about that performance from Perez is that is a typical Sergio Perez performance.
Yeah.
Basically, minus obviously the pit stop for the front wing, he's gone long on a set of hard tires. And because he's such a good tire whisperer of managing tires and basically keeping his tires in the window, the moment the safety car came in, like, I'm sure I've got the screenshots from the little group chat I'm in. I said, "Watch Perez. This guy's dangerous." I said, "This guy, like, this is Sergio Perez. It's always that race when everything's going smoothly and swimmingly, and you think you've seen it all, and then blam, safety car. Everybody's gonna get bunched up, and then because he's looked after his tires now and he stayed out long and he's off." He's basically off centered with the rest of guys. He's not going to miss out because everyone's just going to put under the safety car and he'll just keep the track position. And then we know how mighty fast the Redbull is in a straight line, and Silverstone is, a high speed circuit as well, or one of the highest speed circuits anyway. So, and he had to do the work too. He got the move done on Lewis, bit cheeky. I think he ran Lewis off the road there, but then arguably Leclerc kind of did dive bomb in the first lap as well. So it was always coming. And then yeah, just even to get Leclerc as well and Lewis and to try and like hunt down uh Science in that kind of last couple of laps as well, I think was phenomenal from him too. And then Lewis as well, I think definitely deserves props again. Just another tire whisperer. It's amazing that we live in like a era. I think in a time it will be a bygone era because
Mm.
it's like the modern generation of drivers like Max, and even Max. I think he knows how to manage tires. I just don't think he enjoys doing tire management, as you hear on the radio often. But like there's some drivers like Lewis and Perez where they can just wine and dine a set of Pirelli tires and get their full value for money. It's ridiculous. So even Lewis, just like how he was playing with those Ferraris and really had those Italians in panic mode, just as
Yeah,
to what
yeah.
they were gonna do and stuff. And also we mentioned him earlier, but I think definitely worth a shout on the pod as well. Mick Schumacher, finally.
The slander can stop.
Yeah, for now. For now. But yeah, just after so many opportunities when he could have maybe had it, there was Monaco, which again, I don't think Monaco was drastically different in terms of the finishing order, but you always want to finish there anyway because any number of madnesses could happen there, of course. Then in Miami, he was in the points, and what did he do? He done crashed into Uncle Seb's Aston Martin.
Oh.
How? Literally Uncle Seb's Aston Martin at Miami. He crashed into the side of, and I was like, dude, no. And I think why people are going to be a lot stricter or have been stricter on Mick is because he's always, basically, he's a second season merchant. That's what we have to basically get in there. Like, everyone's always said, oh, Mick, he's a slow burner, but because he's a nice guy, we'll give him a pass, and he's the son of well, obviously the infamous Kaiser that is Michael Schumacher, and he's basically cute, so like give him a slide, basically. But it was getting to crunch point because, and in a very roundabout way, like, so, basically Nikita Mazepin getting dropped was always going to basically, I feel, put Mick in a position where he had to start showing like what he could do. Because when Mazepin was there, obviously we just had to just accept that the two of them were rookies. Mazepin was probably the one worse off, and they were in a car that had no development. Fair enough. But then this year you had Kevin Magnussen come in there and in the first race score points. And even then I was skeptical, Dan, because I was like, you know what, cool, they got points here. But knowing Haas, they're a bit reluctant to bring upgrades to the car. If they're too reluctant, it will be a thing where the rest of teams outdevelop them, and then they're going to
Yeah.
basically be back at square one. But for now, again, we said earlier, for now, like,
Yeah.
they seem to just be like getting in there. And it wasn't even just that Mick got points. Like, Magnussen managed to score some decent points too. And they didn't really benefit from, like, I mean, I guess Russell would have maybe taken a position away from them if he had finished, but then Max finished ahead of both of them. Both of the Ferraris finished ahead of them, and then Lewis finished ahead of them. So
Yep.
anybody ahead of them, you could say, is a direct competitor in terms of McLaren or Alpine. So for them to get that, I think is amazing. And then, yeah, what are your thoughts just for Mick as well, finally doing it?
Yeah, well, I should have seen that he was going to do it this weekend because on the Thursday I said that he's not going to score any points this year. So that's another one of my amazing predictions that's gone completely the other way. But yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. Like his first year in that Haas with Nikita Mazepin, you might as well just write that entire year off. But this year, he needed to hit the ground running. Like you say, I think it was a slow burner, but now he's got points on the board. He's certainly bought at least a couple of races, from me slandering him. But we'll see where we are at the end of the year.
Well, and I think that's the key thing as well, Dan. Like you rightfully mentioned there as well. Like it doesn't stop here. Like there's a balance to be had because I don't feel it's fair for people to just expect him to get points now every single race. Because even K Mag struggles to do that on some occasions. But then again, they have a car which is decent. It's much better than a Williams. They have a much better fundamental understanding of that car compared to Aston Martin. AlphaTauri, oh boy, oh
Oy,
boy.
oy, oy.
Oh man, yeah. There's a row session coming out for those guys, surely,
Yeah.
because yeah, it's again like when things go well for AlphaTauri, they go well. When things don't go well for them, Jesus Christ, man, like it's not ideal. And then yeah, if you're looking at the midfield, obviously Alpine and McLaren and who else could you put in that kind of bracket? Again, Haas, they are kind of there, so props to them, but they've just got to continue pushing, and I'm sure they will continue to get there as time goes by. So, no doubt for sure. Well, on to the next question, Dan. I guess this is the more like controversial one that we saw brewing over the last 2 weeks leading up to Silverstone. Rebel did get some backlash after, well, in chronological order, you had the Yuri Vips incident. He's like doing a little like stream with his friends, and he said some unfavorable words. And then Red Bull put out an apology. They say that they're going to investigate it. They investigate it, and then they take the action to drop him, which, in my opinion, I think was a smart move for Red Bull, and actually I think on the balance of probability, fair enough, Yuri Vips, but I'm gonna come back to that a bit later on as well. And then just when Red Bull were like, cool, we've done our PR, that's it, cool. Like, hopefully there's no more skeletons. Bam!
Oh
People go
wait.
looking for, another clip that surfaces, and it's not even necessarily a Red Bull driver or a Red Bull staff. It's genuinely Max Verstappen's father-in-law, Nelson Piquet, getting basically caught out. And again, some very unfavorable things he said last year in a podcast. And again, I didn't watch it, so I'm not going to really give it too much time of day. But essentially, what I'm grasping is some questions were asked of Nelson in regards to the Silverstone incident. And with it being his son-in-law, maybe he felt aggrieved by what Lewis did. But again, his action and even as the words he used, they weren't suitable for modern day, just like
No.
life generally, you know. And for what we're trying to achieve, I guess, around the world and trying to create awareness of, you know, this, he should know better. So, you know, there've been a lot of agencies, a lot of teams that have condemned like him, but Red Bull, I feel like they were like, God damn it, we literally less than 5 days
Yeah.
ago, and again, you know, and they did get stick for that because a lot of people were looking for them to do that. Even though I feel whether they'd put another statement out or not, it's still not a good look for them. A, and B, just ultimately, I think it's Red Bull, yes, and it's kind of a bit that it keeps being them. But I have no
Yeah.
doubt that there are other teams as well, and they also need to implement measures and educate people further as to what should and shouldn't be allowed in teams, and where people will get onto Red Bull in terms of that. I think Red Bull have tried, you know, in other ways to show that they are a 21st century team, and you know, and you've seen it because they've got like a very like wide plethora of different mechanics that work there, and also, well, I was going to ask you this maybe afterwards. Hannah Smith, which again, for those who live under a rock, she's a female like strategist, head engineer at Red Bull. And, you know, but they say behind every success, there's a great woman. And I think that literally is Hannah Smith in terms of her contribution. And I know
Yeah.
you might have had some workings with her at some point, but getting back to the elephant in the room, Dan, because I tried to do the diplomatic thing, but it just is what it is. What do you think of Red Bull's kind of response to this both incidents? And actually, a debate I was having with someone was, do you think they went far enough with Yuri Vips? Because I think that they did, and I think that him getting dropped from the Red Bull Academy was
Mm.
action. But then some people were like, no, he's still young, and basically you've basically stopped his whole career in terms of him getting a drive into F1, which may or may not be the case. Time will tell on that one. But what's your take on it?
Well, he's done that himself, really. It's 2022. You know, I've done plenty of online gaming. You know, I'm 34. I've done online gaming for 15 years. I can't think of a time where I've ever been inclined to drop an N bomb like he did. So, you know, no excuses in my eyes for that. In regards to Red Bull Racing's response, they announced that he would be dropped as their reserve driver, and I think it's development driver was his other role. In terms of Red Bull Racing, that's really all they can drop him from, because that's the only role he actually has with Red Bull Racing. His Red Bull Junior status is actually controlled by the Red Bull company itself. And of course, his F2 seat is controlled by High Tech.
High tech.
So, why some people will say, oh, it was a bit of a soft response from Red Bull Racing. Legally and technically, I think it's the only thing they could have done. And the whole Nelson PK thing is just like, let's be honest, this guy was never pleasant anyway. He's historically said some pretty nasty things about drivers he raced with. I think he's made some homophobic comments in the past. Like, the best course of action with him, I think, is pretty much what you've done, mate, and just not pay any attention to him or listen to him. So yeah, he's banned from the paddock now, I believe, but I don't actually think he ever went to the paddock that much anyway, to be honest. But it's just been a bad time all round, really, isn't it, for Red Bull? It's for a company that's built and purpose in F1 is to be positive PR. They've done quite a good job of messing that up recently.
Yeah, and you know, Dan, it's I'm gonna like, you know, and it's not my role to really do this either, but I'm just being like as neutral or as kind of balanced as I can be. It's not just them, and I don't feel, at least me anyway, looking in, I don't feel it's the entire team. I don't think all the engineers go around like saying the N bomb, being like horrifically misogynistic to women, and you know Christian Horner's there giving. I don't think it's a that thing. I just think that some of it is education, and I think that that wouldn't just be a Red Bull thing. I think it'd be all the teams that all of them will have to go on some sort of like diversity and inclusivity kind of training, and we have that even just in the field of work I do in the legal sector. So it's not even just an F1 thing. And then actually, ironically enough, today we had Malik, a Miami lawyer, which is very outspoken with his points too. And you were saying it again, it's not just the racism thing, it's not just a Red Bull thing, like it's a global thing. And teams, rather than trying to change the views of people like Nelson Piquet and like Bernie Ecclestone and even borderline, Sir Jackie Stewart with some of the stuff that he said that was a bit distasteful. You got to try and question these guys a bit different, because if you start labeling these guys with some of the stuff they've done, it'll make them question their behavior a lot more. A, and then B, racism it just isn't for in terms of this Formula One. You also have to look at what it's like at grassroots levels too. So it's not just a case of putting the responsibility and looking for Red Bull for a response. Where's the diversity and inclusivity in relation to F4, F3,
Mm.
F2? It should be a thing from the ground up, going into these different things. And I think in terms of Formula One, yeah, the fans have a voice, and we've seen that quite a lot, with the FAA's response to the backlash they got for Abu Dhabi. But then it doesn't stop there either. And I think that for people that genuinely care, there's more we can do, because, there's if you care so much for diversity and you want to promote it, why not try and see if you can get together? And if there's a local kid at the track that's like maybe a star of the future, why not try and create something where you can sponsor him to, like, or her, or they, to try and get into the sport, and try and give them an opportunity. So I think, yeah, the FIA are accountable, and F1 are
Yeah.
accountable, and the teams are accountable for their messaging and the imaging that they have as well. But also as fans too, we have a lot of power, rather than just trying to enforce it upon things that might not change, or people which are stuck in certain ways. We can do a lot more, even from the seed going upwards, to kind of influence the positive changes we want to see.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, F1. I think it's more of an F1 problem rather than a specific team. And I think I said this to someone else the other day. It's all good and well Formula One going into all these other new markets and things like that. But what's the point if you're alienating a subset of your fans already with continuous statements but no real action?
Exactly.
So I basically I'm fed up with statements at the minute, Denz. I actually want to see something happening.
Yeah, yeah, and Dan, that's like all of us in this boat as well, man. Because that's the thing, and we've seen it with them. Like, we saw the gestures they're making. We racist one. There's lots of things that they've done or tried to implement, but it shouldn't stop there. And I think as well, we shouldn't accept it. We shouldn't accept what people like Nelson Piquet say and Bernie Ecclestone say. But at the same time, we need to learn to, like, not give these guys a platform, if that's the sort of thing that they're using the platform for. Because in any other form
Mm,
of discrimination or any other kind of like thing where you see this thing happening, very quickly you see this like action being taken, and like moves being made to prohibit that kind of thing happening again. And bringing it back to Red Bull too, I think that there are places where I think they are like class leading, because as I mentioned as well, we've got Hannah Smiths, like one of the head lead tactical strategy engineers at Red Bull. And just for those who don't know, she actually featured on an episode of Ted Kravitz kind of Sky segment, which I thought was really fascinating, because they were talking about that very infamous Spanish Grand Prix race. So Max almost basically he was almost going to self implode. I thought, rather than engine failure, I thought there was going to be a Max Verstappen failure. He might like literally internally combust with the
yeah.
Honda engine, because he's so angry. And even like Martin Brundle made me chuckle when he was just like, Max must be just thinking, what are these incompetent idiots doing? I come here every week I put my best foot forward. You guys couldn't even get a flapping DRS to work. What do I have to do to make sure like things work? And that made me giggle. But like bringing it to the center of the kind of point I was gonna make, like Ted was speaking with Hannah Smith and said, you're like one of only a few, but you're a trendsetter, and you're gonna encourage and bring like a lot of women into like this role in Formula One and with Red Bull too. But basically, you're the brains behind Max essentially still winning that race, because I'm sure if we had just left Max out there, essentially, like he would have just imploded behind Russell. But it was her kind of move, maybe to take Max out of the situation, to remove him completely from that situation, to put him on an alternate strategy with different tires, where he still had the race pace with clean air, and he wasn't going to get held up by Russell being defensive all the time, and he still managed to do it. So again, like I guess there is a lot of negativity around Red Bull in certain regards. It is kind of deserved, but I feel as well like it's a shame because they are trying to be diverse. They are trying to give people a different platform. And if you've got like a woman as like the top dog, basically, I wouldn't even say she's the Bono. She's the James Vowles, basically, of the race team. That's a huge deal and a step forward. But just what's your take, Dan? And did you have many interactions with her when you were with the team?
So I only really ever spoke to Hannah in passing a couple of times, but she's in those limited interactions, she's a lovely lady and, like you say, brilliant at her job. In terms of like the inclusion and things like that at the team, I think they could probably do things better, but I think that's true of everywhere. This isn't just this sort of thing. You would never get to a position and say, right, we're done. It's a continuously evolving learning process. So, still, I think work to be done. I think their role in the Hamilton Commission, I think they only did like the bare minimum, which I was disappointed about. I think, I would like to have seen them take a more, basically give more to that. So yeah, I think there's still work to be done, but like I say, I think that's true of everywhere.
Yeah, I agree with you as well, Dan. And that's the thing, like we're having these conversations and they're productive conversations. And I think there's things to be done on both sides in terms of what people's realistic expectations are sometimes, but also that people can use their voice to make positive change, and in a very not necessarily stooping to other people's level, or basically going on to Twitter to create World War III. Like there are much more kind of efficient ways of basically getting the same goal achieved. So I agree with you, and thank you as well for being able and being so honest with us in relation to that too, because like we all love you, we love what we do, and you I think, again, not I wanted to just be a thing of you're just blowing smoke on my ass, but then like I think honestly your top five most loved people in our community. Like everybody loves Engine Mode 11, man. I don't care like what fan base you're from. Like Dan's just an amazing guy, and he just says it as it is too. So yeah, you're one of the best, man. So yeah, just getting on to the kind of next bit, Dan, and just kind of to round up this show as well. Predictions for the Austrian Grand Prix, because we are essentially in the back garden of Helmut Marko. Obviously, the team
Yeah.
as well own the circuit. Man, Red Bull have been dominant there, man. Just to my dismay, I think in one of the most previous races we had there, Max led the race by such a margin. He came right next to like you know where I'm going with this, like
Yeah, yeah,
basically
yeah.
the start line straight, right next to where the guys put like the pit board to say, like, it's 8 seconds, 3 seconds, pit now, whatever the kind of pit board messages. He was so clear of the opposition. He actually stopped the car and did a burnout to cross the line. I was like,
Yeah.
how crushing must that be as one of the opposition drivers if your opponent slowly beat you? They had enough time to do pull up on the side of the circuit and do a burnout. Still gonna
That's a
complete the
flex.
Grand Prix. That's a huge flex, and it doesn't
Yeah.
really look like there's gonna be much to stop Red Bull. Other than I was thinking, the nature of the circuit, because the circuit is used not only for F1 but very scarily for MotoGP racing as well, which I think we can save for another episode. There are a lot of sausage curbs there, and just a lot of track limit measures to
Mm.
prevent drivers from being very adventurous and creative with the limits of the circuit. And in previous Grand Prix we've seen, I think this 2020 season where like basically Valtteri's engineer was saying, mate, do not touch another curb or else I'll murder you. Like
Yeah.
it became almost critical in terms of like the performance from the floor, even back then. So we touched on it earlier, just with like, you know, how critical the floor energy, the floor part of the car is to get energized, and how like if you don't have that part working for the car, basically nothing else works. Like how interesting is this race going to be with the nature of the curbs at Austria, and what are your expectations as well of this Grand Prix?
So I think Red Bull are going to throw absolutely everything at it to win this one, because the rumor I've heard is that this is the race where we're going to announce the Porsche 2026 link up with Red Bull powertrains. So they're going to want to put on a good show for PR reasons. It's a track that Red Bull have always been strong at. Given the performance of the car this year, can't really see that changing. I think Ferrari will have a bit more of a headache with the Mercedes. But I think Red Bull, maybe we'll get another burnout, mate, I think.
Oh, well, in terms of the championship, that would be that Harriet Ainsley spice. But you know, if I was a betting man and I just had to say in normal circumstances, like what do I envision happening? Yeah, I think prehistorically, like you mentioned, Red Bull have always been quite strong here. So it like again, it is a different formula, but I can't understand why they wouldn't be strong, given that you basically have two very long straights, and then even the corners, like I guess you've got like a hairpin for the third corner, but ultimately it's a very high speed circuit. You know, where I guess the emphasis is a lot on like the high speed downforce of the cars and them being able to be stable, which the Red Bull looks quite strong at. Ferrari, this is a really sticky one for them now, because I feel they've got to make a call now. Like, are they going to do the love and light thing and try and just continue to give both of the drivers equal opportunities, and they're going to be stumbling across each other? And like you mentioned as well, there's a new headache now with Mercedes being even more closer. Is it a thing now where they just say, listen, like, you know, if science does well, science does well, but we just have to put our eggs more in terms of Leclerc's basket? Because to me, other than Lewis, like, I think, to be fair, like Leclerc's the only driver I've seen with my own eyes take it to Max and not take any of Max's bullcrap either. Like if Max
Yeah.
runs Leclerc off the circuit, Leclerc will run Max off at the circuit as well. Like he's a real, like he's I know F1 Black refers to them as like the Codemaster generation of drivers, which I think is quite funny
Makes me
considering the
feel
games
so
being
old.
released. Yeah. But to me, I just call them track terrorists. Like they don't give like literally a monkeys about anyone's feelings. Like I mentioned, it's Max. For me, it's Max, and he comes on the radio and like one minor thing, like Lewis coming out ahead of him in Canada, even though they're completely on offsetted parts of strategy. And Max is like, why did you put me behind this guy? And I think even Max's engineer now has realized how to deal with his personality. And I think dealing with Max's personality is just being blunt. Like, so I think the response was, "Oh, you weren't quick enough." To which Max just went completely quiet, and you knew probably behind the helmet, he was like, "You know what? Oh, I'm not quick enough. I'm not quick enough. Okay, okay. I show you people. I show you people." And it's just like, damn, like he really like. That's the thing. I'll leave this podcast on as well, Dan. Like, what have you made of Max's his demeanor this season? Because to me, he looks like a man possessed. He looks like a man which knows that his championship last year was tainted a lot by some of the external factors, by the team and by the FIA as well. So it looks like this time he really needs to dominate the championship by force and by pure domination. And
Yep.
like he's not leaving no stone unturned, man. Like he even he interviewed him the other day and was like, "Yo, what do you think you could improve, Max?" Like, yeah, qualifying is unacceptable. I was like, "What do you mean? You on the front row of the grid?" And he was like, "Nope, no, it's not good enough to be on the front row of the grid. I want to be in pole position because I need to basically cover off the races where it's difficult to overtake. So if I lead the race and I have a car that's like very fast in a straight line, there's nothing you could do to me." So to me, Dan, like this is a man possessed, like, and he wants to leave no stone unturned whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think the way I sort of look at it and explain it is that he has matured in a way that only people that have won their can. You know, granted, like you say, it was questionable circumstances, but now he has that first one. It's changed his think from being, oh, am I ever going to win one, to sort of, okay, I've won one. Now I can just focus on myself and my driving in a way. And like you say, we end up with this Max Verstappen where he's brutal, honest, and just unashamedly Max.
Yeah. Well put there, Dan. Well put. I agree. Just like it's a thing, and maybe it's the fact that, you know, like, again, I know Josh is a very controversial individual, and again, that's probably another podcast. But yeah, just like you could see that tough upbringing, it plays in this his demeanor, and just he needs to win. But at the same time, like when he knows he can't win, he's just cool to just rack up some points. And I think a prime example of that was Monaco, where he knew that the team probably weren't going to invert the positions. He tried a little kind of, oh, Perez is being really slow on his tires, but I think he knew that the team weren't going to do that. The cost and risk of Sainz being able to maybe jump them, like, he just knows his assignment. And to be honest, when there isn't an issue with the car, he's there. You know, like he is there, and even if it's not a race win, he's on the podium, which is what you need to do. And I think whilst that's going on, Leclerc would love that, but it's just Ferrari, man. You perfectly phrased it. Like, the only thing to stop Charles from winning a championship is Ferrari, and it will be Ferrari, and it always has been Ferrari in the most kind of weirdly like way. It's just always the way it is. But before we wrap up the show as well, we're gonna bring on our next segment, which Georgina has kindly told us to implement, and it is mean tweets. So yeah, on the topic of mean tweets, it's not abuse, so please don't send us abuse. Thank you. But no, it's funny. It's funny tweets. That's what we're rebrandishing as mean tweets. So, in fact, Dan, you're in first place this week because one of your tweets was voted in, and it's the picture of Bonotto waving the finger at Charles Leclerc, and they say like, "Listen here, you little shit." Like, yeah, it's just funny because I get Charles's perspective and why Charles would be maybe critical of them over the radio. But then that's the thing with Ferrari as well. And well, I'll give Bonotto credit. You know, he's really tried to galvanize the team, to make the team together. I think maybe under I always get the guy's name, Arriva Bene era. There's lots of chaos and a lot of toxicity. I think Carlos and I think Bonotto have brought a world of just calm to the team, and they've just calmed down a bit. So I could even see why, even though Charles wouldn't be happy, why Bonotto is just trying to kind of like, you know, still energize him and just remind him that this championship is far from over, you know, providing they don't do themselves, of course. So yeah, that was one of the tweets, Dan. Shout out to you for that one, of course.
Yep.
The next one I've got here,
like the Obama photo of putting the medal on myself. Well done, me.
Mate, you deserve it. You deserve it. And the other one I've seen as well, on the topic of Obama, this had me creasing, man. Let me see if I can bring it up. So to set the context, you've got pit stop
I know what
fracas
this is
again.
going to be. Yeah.
Yeah, they were getting hella roasted. But shout out to pit stop fracas as well. Awesome dudes. You know, I think they make good content personally. But yeah, some of the views can be a bit left field. And essentially, I think it was Anik. Anik had come out basically and was trying to calm the Mercedes fans down because Mercedes fans are probably saying that Ferrari bottled it. And then Ferrari, rightfully so as well, saying, well, mate, your car's dog shit. So who are you to tell me about bottling stuff when you bottled your entire car? But essentially, Anik was like, Mercedes, come talk to me when you get close to a race win. It's been almost 8 months and 10 races and you haven't celebrated a win, which is whoosh. It's a burn. And this my favorite response has to be Buck Nasty, pre-Mystic. His response was, Ferrari last won a title when Barack Obama was in administration. Find some shame.
Anik has been fighting today on that app, I tell you.
Man, he's on a dying hill, man. He's on a dying hill. Like he should know. He should know that Mercedes fans are the last. They're the last fans that you want to like rattle. Cause mate, just it doesn't matter where they'll find the dirt from or what like lengths they'll go to. Man are bringing up like Barack Obama's time in office to disprove a point, which I thought was absolute Twitter gold. Again, shout out to
Oh yeah.
Premistic and the shout out to the community as well, because it's to me it's just banter. Like, and as long as it stays banter, that's cool. Everyone has an opinion. My PE teacher said that opinions are like noses and assholes. Everyone has one, so like that's fair enough. Fair enough. And then the last one, which I don't really think is a mean tweet, I just thought it was funny, and I actually did kind of mention this during the time of Eurovision. Dan, how's your music knowledge, and did you watch Eurovision this year?
I did watch it, but I was slightly incapacitated with alcohol. So,
Man, it's the best time to watch it. You got the ultimate combo there. So I don't know, considering you were incapacitated with a lot of alcohol, I imagine, like, do you remember Britain's finest Sam Ryder, aka
yes,
Valtteri Bottas's
yes,
twin brother? Because another funny tweet that kind of went viral as well is obviously Sam Ryder, which for those who don't know, he's a British musician and an artist. He represented Britain in competition called Eurovision, which I think really doesn't need an explanation. But unless you live under a rock, no Dwayne Johnson. Like, it's one of the biggest like song competitions where like basically one person from each country within Europe. I think there are exceptions to the rule, but don't disprove the rule, of course. Come together, and this is a funny competition, man. Because you get some people, you're like, that's really cool. You get some people, you're like, how the hell did you get there? This is an acts where you're just like, okay, this is crazy. This isn't even about the
mm.
music anymore. And
It's
there's
like
some
X
really good
Factor.
quotes. Yeah. Man, that's like the perfect analogy. I agree. Just like it's everything basically. So I implore you guys to watch it if you've never experienced it before. But yeah, just Sam Ryder was a representative, or he was Britain's contestant. He got really close. I think a lot of people were saying that had it not been for the whole Ukraine Russia tensions, perhaps people wouldn't have had the sympathy vote for them and voted for UK, but this is not a political show. So getting to the crux of the joke anyway, Sam Ryder got the opportunity to make an appearance at the British Grand Prix in a very Jimi Hendrixy appearance, whipped out a guitar and sang the national anthem. Some people say really badly, but the guy really resembles Valtteri Bottas. So, I think there's actually a picture of Valtteri Bottas and Sam Ryder together, and for me, it's the beard, man. It's the beard and just the blondish kind of Scandinavian like look as well for both of them. And I was like, yeah, that has to go down as like one of the memorable tweets of the week as well. So yeah, that was really funny. And Dan, my man, I'm gonna leave you with the final word for stripping the dipping, bro. Like, it's been an honor to have you on. We need to get you on later down in the season as well. Just things, get to the melting point. We're already like, well, officially halfway into the season now. Now that there's only 22 races for the calendar, but
Yeah.
final words from you as well, man.
Go out and enjoy some chubby hubby.
Oh yeah! Shout out to the reference there to Doctor Obs too. We're a huge Ben and Jerry's advocate on this channel, and much to Georgina's dismay, because I will hunt you and I will find you, like in the great words of Liam Lawson in Taken. She owes me lots of ice cream. Yeah, chubby hobby is the vibe, But I don't think you get it in this country, Dan. I think it is like an American thing, no?
I don't think I've seen it in this country. No.
I haven't seen it either, and like they're very creative as well over here, man. Because like we've got the traditional stuff like cookie dough and caramel chew, but even the other day there was like a caramel core, and I was like, whoa, okay, caramel core kind of sounds like Nilly. I can kind of get jiggy with this. And when I actually tasted it, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, it's kind of like blunt chunks of like shortcake, but it's got swirls of caramel. Okay, I can get jiggy with this, but still not hubby chubby. So a bit of a thumbs down to Ben and Jerry's. If any Ben and Jerry's representatives are listening to this podcast, first of all, please sponsor us. And secondly of all, we'd love to see well, Hobby Chubby in the UK. But Dan, my man, where can they find you, bro?
You can find me at Engine Mode 11 on Twitter. And while I am talking about this, I am literally sending a tweet to Ben and Jerry's UK asking them on your behalf, DENZ, why we don't get this chubby hubby. So hopefully we'll get a response for you.
Oh, Dan, you see, this is why you're the man, bro. This is why you have to be top 3. And I'm not saying this lightly either. Dan is literally top 3 Twitter people on Twitter. I know that's not really the professional way of saying it, but Twitter people on Twitter. And this Dan, just honestly, man, I'm so honored to have you as always. I love the interactions as well when we're always poking fun at each other and stuff. It's great, and just man, I love having you as part of our group as well, man. I'm one of the regulars on the show too. So everybody make sure they go and follow Engine Mode 11 on Twitter, please.
Yep. And hopefully we can all have a drink together at Silverstone next year. I've made a decision on going.
I need to as well, man. And I'm sure a lot of people, based on what they saw last year, based on what they saw this year, they would be, yeah, just like this. There's no excuse. You just have to go. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, we could catch up in person in real life at some point too, man. Because I think it'd just be awesome if we just get everybody from the community like in one place and we have a few beers and just like chop it up on good times as well. So, Dan, you are a legend. Thank you for being on today's episode. And for all the listeners too, make sure you go and follow Dan, of course. Make sure you follow the channel as well on YouTube, on Twitter, on SoundCloud, on Apple Podcasts too. Leave a review. Let us know what we can do. And shout out to the boss lady Georgina as always, although she owes me ice cream indefinitely and in perpetuity, using these big words. And until next time, it's been your boy AMG DENZ, aka Mr. Chubby Hubby, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode of Stripping the Dipping. Peace.